and there to really just carry you in whatever industry that you're in, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're in a professional sphere. And so, as Cassandra said, I'm very passionate about missions, and it's so interesting because as I was sitting earlier and just thinking about what aspect of my story, as Gerard shared about the importance of telling your story, and then he asked me a question, and that question sparked some things in me, and I said, wow, that's just going to change my whole presentation. But that's how God does things. Sometimes he can cause someone to ask you something and it will just disrupt everything. And so what I'm specifically going to talk to you guys today about is living missionally, and within that, going, growing, and glowing, and how that connects to living missionally. I am a real DC native. Is there any other real DC natives in here? Okay, I'm the only one. That's crazy. Okay, so I was actually born and raised in DC, pre-gentrified DC, crack era DC, go-go DC, disco Dan DC, all of that. And I love my city. I love DC. It has shaped who I am as a woman, as an entrepreneur, and everything, every aspect of my life. And when it comes to living missionally and what that actually means, it means that every one of us, we are called in some way to be the hands and feet of Jesus. And that is within our business, within our music abilities. We're called to be his hands and feet. And so I often refer to myself, and I've been classified as the modern missionary. And what are modern missionaries? Modern missionaries, first of all, typically, what do missionaries look like? I mean, a lot of people have stereotypes for what missionaries look like. And when I heard of the term missionary, I thought that it was someone who had on an all-white outfit, right, sat on the front row of the church with a missionary badge. Or I thought it was a white woman somewhere with no makeup on, in the fields, barefoot, in some crazy clothes. Or I may have thought of someone looking like a hippie or somewhere serving in Africa. And while all of those different people probably could be classified as a missionary, that's not what I'm talking about here today. When I speak of a modern missionary, I'm talking about each and every one of you, whether you are in PR, whether you're in marketing, whether you're in skincare, whatever it is that you are doing, you are a modern missionary. And within that sphere of influence that you have, the ultimate purpose that you have is to be the hands and feet of Jesus. And so we're going to talk about that and what that ultimately looks like. So the question that Jared asked me, he saw my phone and he saw a picture of my dad and me on my wedding day. And he asked me, what was the most important lesson that you learned from your dad? And I got to thinking, and I said, the most important lesson that I learned from my dad was he talked to everyone. He treats the janitor the same way that he would treat the CEO. There was never a stranger in his presence. And he was one of those people that would come into a room like this and he would speak to everyone. He would compliment you on your outfit. Like, hey girl, look at you. Oh, okay, look at your shoes. Hey man, what's up? You looking fresh. And he always spoke to everyone. And because of that, everyone knew his name. I could go anywhere with him in DC and they would be like, hey Shump, is that Shump? Because that was his last name, Shumpert. Or they'd be like, hey Greg, and everyone always knew who he was because he understood that everybody was on an equal playing field. And when it comes to living missionally and how that ties in our spheres of influence, when we're out doing what God has called us to do, everyone, we should be treating everyone as if they are important, as if they are someone of influence. When we go into places like this, I always look for the people who come up and I look for the people too who are like quiet, aren't saying anything, and I intentionally go over and try to start a conversation with them, because everyone should be treated as if they are a person of influence. And you never know how that conversation that you're going to have with them can just change the course of their day and change the course of their life. And so when he asked me that question, it just really made me reflect on how much my father's character shaped who I am today, and my heart for people and living missionally, and what that actually looks like. And my father just passed in September of last year. And so this is a lesson that I just will continue to hold dear to my life. So let's just talk about going, growing, and glowing, and how that ties into living missionally. So we're all called to go. And what does that mean? Well, when I think of going, I automatically, when I was thinking of the theme, I automatically, because I am a modern missionary, I think of the Great Commission and what that is. And the Great Commission was Jesus' last command, and his last command should be our first concern, no matter what industry we're in. And so that command was simply to go out into all the world and preach the gospel to all the nations, where you may be saying, okay, well, I'm in an office, or I'm in media, so what does that actually look like? Our lives, all of us, we are walking sermons. All of our lives are saying something, whether it's speaking to the glory and the goodness of God, or it's speaking to the enemy or negativity. So all of our lives have a message. And so you may not necessarily be in a traditional preacher or minister role, but your life is preaching a message. And one thing about Jesus that's just so profound is that Jesus' ministry was only 3 years. It was only 3 years, and he got more done in 3 years' time than many of us have gotten done in our 30-something years of life. Why? Because he was intentional, and he was about his Father's business. He was about going and getting things done, no matter what it is. He was about defying the odds and not allowing fear to stop him from doing what it was that he was ultimately called to do. And I often think about it, this is a very, very important weekend for a lot of Christians. And this is the resurrection weekend, this is Easter weekend, so I'm just gonna just flow in all of this right now. But I often think in that moment when Jesus, he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he had a choice at that moment, and he prayed this prayer, and he said, hey, Father, if it be your will, let this cup pass from me. And then he immediately said, not my will, but your will be done. And when I think of us going, there are gonna be things that God has impressed upon your heart to do that you may look in your bank account, and I'm so sorry, but you may not have that perfect financial plan yet, and it's really, really good to make sure that we're planning, but there may be some things that he's stirring on the inside of you and he wants you to do, but you're gonna have to push past your will and your emotions and say, not my will, but your will be done. And trust that when you push past that he's gonna meet you on the other side with some provision. Back in 2012, I was let go from my full-time job. Now, prior to that, I had a history of being let go. I worked in the nonprofit sector, and so I was an executive assistant. And so what would happen, I would work a job, and then the next thing you know, I would get comfortable. And then within a year, I would be let go. And so after that happened about 6 times, yep, it happened 6 times in my career. My resume looked like somebody's scroll because it was so long, full of different jobs. After the sixth time, I looked at my husband and I said, babe, I think God is trying to tell me something. I think it may be time for me to work my passion, to be a passionpreneur, so to speak. And I said, babe, give me 6 months. I know it doesn't make sense. I know that our bank account isn't where it needs to be right now, but I feel this stirring I have peace. And I know that I'm supposed to be doing something different. I know that God is pushing me. And sometimes what will happen, he'll use your circumstances to push you in to purpose, to make sure that you're going to go, all right, and do what it is that he's called you to do. And sometimes that's not going to be a comfortable space. And so fast forward within 6 months, just by me being obedient and then working my passions consistently, I was able to double my income that I was making on my government job. And I share that to say, well, y'all can clap for that. And I share that to say, you just never know what's on the other side of your yes. And on the other side of your yes, there are people that you're going to impact. There are things that you just wouldn't imagine that will be there, that will ultimately change your life. And then when I ultimately think about the great example setter, Jesus Christ, look at what was on the other side of his yes. On the other side of his yes, there are lives changed. There are people who now are able to walk in freedom and able to be saved from wrath just because of his yes. So that's going. Now let's talk about growing. If we aren't growing, we're dead. Things that grow bear fruit. So what does fruit look like? When it comes to fruit and when it comes to the aspect that I'm talking about, fruit isn't necessarily something that can be quantified. Fruit is impact when it comes to a kingdom entrepreneur. And whatever it is that you're doing, if you're not making impact, if it's only benefiting you, then it's time to scrap and rework. And so even in every business venture that I have been a part of, I'm always looking to see, all right, can I make someone else money? Can I help someone else with their purpose? Can I help someone else get closer to God? Am I taking the lid off of someone else's life? And when you do that, that's how you know, okay, now I'm growing. Now I have some fruit by which I can measure this thing. Is my music impacted the masses? Is it making them think, more about God? Is it making them think more about themselves and their purpose in their lives? Is my job, at corporate America, the lives that I'm touching right then and there as I'm interacting with the admin or the receptionist, how are their lives being impacted or changed? Or am I just, passing them by and just having them, just do whatever for me, but not really stopping to have a conversation? We have to really think about that in every arena that we're in. Your office is your mission field. Your office is your mission field. Before you even go off to Africa and the far lands, how are we making impact right here in the four corners of our block? And once you start making impact in the four corners of your block, God will take your vision to the four corners of the world. Be faithful over the little and watch him make you ruler over many. Number 3, glowing. Matthew 5:16 says, in the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. Glowing is not about us. When we're glowing in our sphere of influence and what God has ultimately called us to do, it is so that people can see Cassandra's life and say, wow, glory to God. I know where she's been. I know her journey. I've seen her journey. And that can encourage them that will encourage them in their faith and know that they can do it as well. That they will be able to look at your life, Candace, and give glory to God in heaven just because they've been able to see the journey. And so that's what glowing is about. Glowing is not simply coming up. Our leveling up is never just, our leveling up, first of all, is not about you versus them. It's about you versus you. So you're leveling up and doing whatever it is that God has called you to do and making it in your business is about making impact. It's about people being able to look at your life and say, you know what? I know there is a God. Because if God could use her, if God could use the young girl from Southeast DC who used to sell drugs, who used to dance at a strip club, who used to do all kinds of crazy things, if God could now use her to preach the gospel, to be a businesswoman, to make impact, if he can use her, then I know that there is a God and there is nothing that he cannot do. God can do anything. That's what your life should be representing when you're glowing. Finally, as we're going, growing, and glowing, I'm just going to recap all of this and what this ultimately means as we're living missionally. Again, all of us are martyr missionaries. So when you go out and when you leave this place on today, your ultimate goal is to reflect the love of Christ, being his hands and feet, treating the janitor the same way that you'll treat the CEO or that other person that you want that business deal from. Because ultimately, you never know who God is going to use. You never know who God will use in order to open up a door and take you to the next level. I remember in my government job, I was an executive assistant. I was in a cubicle. I remember the people who were making the big bucks walking past me, not inviting me to lunch, talking about me, treating me as if, okay, whatever, I'm nothing. And who would have known that just 2 to 3 short years later, I would be a 7-figure earner in my own business. God, and that's all glory to God, and that's not to brag or anything like that, but that's just to show you never know who people can become. So you want to make sure that you're treating everyone with love and with respect. Also, when it comes to growing, we need to make sure that whatever we're doing is making impact, that it's developing fruit. And this is another thing that I wanted to share too, as it pertains to growing. When we're growing, we are not busy, but we're productive. And I just wanted to state that because millennials, we are really great about being busy. We're doing so much. So I'm gonna close this because I know I'm short on time, but with 3 ways that we can be being productive over being busy. So when you're being productive, you're making God moves over good moves, okay? You're making those, what I call bloody moves? That was corny, right? But you're making God moves over good moves. So what are God moves? The way that you know that you're making a God move, first of all, you have to pray. You have to make sure that you have a prayer life and that you're discerning. You have to make sure that the peace of God comes with it. And it has to glorify God, whatever move that you're making. So that career move or that business deal, how is it ultimately going to glorify God? Is it going to help someone? Is it going to help my family? Is this a God move or a good move? Also, busy people say yes quickly and often, and productive people say yes slowly. Productive people are counting the cost. What does it mean to count the cost? It simply means that before you say yes, to simply just say it slow, because sometimes it can be it seems like it's a good opportunity, but it could be an opportunity that's simply a distraction to pull you further and further away from what God has ultimately called you to do. So you want to be a person whose yes is their yes and their no is their no. But the way to do that is to move slowly. Don't be so quick to say yes. And lastly, productive people let their results do the talking. Busy people talk about how busy they are.
Yeah.
All right? We all know people that are always talking about how busy they are. But productive people, they're letting their results do the talking. And then going back to that great example setter, Jesus Christ, like I said, 3 years, y'all, and he was the most productive dude ever, okay? He was about his Father's business. He had miracles happening. He changed people's lives. He turned water into wine. He had time to do a whole lot of stuff and still made time to die for us. And that's what we're celebrating this weekend. The fact that he didn't just die, but he also rose.
Amen.
And so we can just get excited about that, because that is even more important than all this business stuff. That's the foundation. That's why we can live, breathe, move, and have our being. That's why we can make impact in whatever sphere of influence, because he ultimately rose. And so that's what this whole living missionally thing is about. Doing what God has called us to do with that in mind, that we're serving a greater purpose and that we are to be his hands and feet of Jesus. And so when people look at you, they're going to be like, yeah, God did that.
Yeah.
Thank y'all so much.
All right, y'all. So that was amazing. Give Jennifer another round of applause.